Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are going to do the 7th episode of the summary of the Quran, which is actually going to begin the second group of surahs out of the 7 groups that we have in the Quran. This group comprises of 4 surahs. The first 2, Al-An'am, which we are going to do tonight, 6th surah, and Al-A'raf, the 7th surah, are Meccan and they form a pair. And the next 2 surahs, Al-Anfal and At-Tawbah, are Medinan surahs and they too form a pair. The subject matter, the theme of this particular group is the annihilation, punishment of the Almighty getting inflicted upon the enemies of the Prophet who rejected the message despite clearly knowing it to be from God, and the ultimate dominance and victory of the companions of the Prophet, and most certainly the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him as well. So what we find in these 4 surahs of the group, very clear steps leading from one phase to another to the ultimate climax. The first surah, Surah Al-An'am, which we are going to do tonight, is inviting the people of Mecca in particular and the Arabian Peninsula in general to have faith in the message that has come to them from somebody who is a part of their community. The next surah, Surah Al-A'raf, is warning the people who are rejecting this message of dire consequences of punishment in this life as well as the next life. The next surah, Al-Anfal, which is a Medinan surah, is talking about the preparation for the ultimate punishment of those who have rejected the faith, and because this punishment was to be inflicted by believers, therefore the believers are invited to prepare themselves for that battle morally, spiritually, as well as physically, militarily. And the final surah, Surah Tawbah, is the surah of punishment, and it's the only surah of the Quran which doesn't begin by the beginning verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, because the attributes of Rahman Rahim, the most merciful, the ones whose mercies forever, was not consistent in its theme and mood with the rest of the surah. So we find in this particular group that there is irrefutable evidence established for the people of Quraysh, Meccan people, about the truthfulness of the message of God. The companions are required to go through the process of purification and moral and spiritual excellence, and then ultimately the Almighty's punishment is inflicted upon the enemies. So let's start with the first surah, Surah Al-An'am, surah number 6. Like the first group of surahs, this group also begins with Alhamdulillah. All expressions of praise and gratitude are for God, the Creator. This is an indication of the reality that God's message is primarily based on the feelings of thankfulness, gratefulness for the Creator, who's been kind to us, for giving us all the resources that we have with us, we enjoy, and we are able to live in this world. The verse says, Alhamdulillah allazi khalaqa as-samawati wal arda. All expressions of thanks and praise are the exclusive right of the God who created the heavens and the earth. وَجَعَلَ الظُّلُمَاتِ وَالنُّورِ. And He also created darkness as well as light. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ يَعْدِلُونَ. And yet those who disbelieve equate others with their Lord. This life has been created as an amazing spectacle of the Almighty's miracles, enabling us to be able to live a life which we all like, we all love. But we also see that there are difficulties in this life, and there are darknesses of untruth, of evil, and there is light of truth, of goodness, of virtue. This has been done so as to make this life a trial. In verse 6, the Almighty mentions, Kataba ala nafsihi rahma. He has made it binding on himself. God has made it binding on himself to be merciful. And for that purpose, he has decided that he is going to bring about a day when he is going to make all humans accountable. La yajmannakum ila yawmil qiyamati la rayba fi. Most certainly he is going to gather you all on the day of judgment, la rayba fi, the arrival of which is beyond any doubt. This is very similar to what we find in Surah Al-Fatiha, the first surah of the Quran, wherein the Almighty says that He is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. His mercy is profound, His kindness is forever, Maliki Yawmiddin. Therefore, He is going to be the master of the day of judgment. The idea is that God is merciful, and indeed His mercy is reflected in many things that we are experiencing, benefiting from in this life. Yet we do find that there is injustice, tyranny. People are subjected to torture, miseries, and one often wonders, where has the merciful God gone? And the answer given by the Quran is that He's there, watching you all of you. But because He has made this life a life of trial, therefore He has chosen not to intervene immediately in some of the wrongdoings that are happening in this life, to allow all that is happening to go on with freedom, without any coercion, force, so that in the next life, on the day of judgment, when judgment is made, accountability process is undertaken, everybody is judged with justice and mercy, because it's God's mercy which would require the people who were tortured, who were exploited, to be compensated fully for what they went through. So this day of judgment that the Almighty promises so very often through His messengers is a day that's going to happen because God is merciful. We move on to verse 20, where the Almighty is telling the people of Mecca that you are rejecting the Prophet who has come to you from within you, is a part of your tribe, your nation. But on the other hand, Allazina atainahumul kitab, those whom we gave the book, that is before the Quran, yarifunahu, they recognize him, kama yarifuna abnahum, the same way as they recognize their own sons, their own children. Allazina khasiru anfusahum, but those who have caused harm to their souls by doing evil things, fahum la yu'minun, so they are not going to believe. That is, whether you believe in our Prophet or not, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter to us. It's going to cause harm to you if you don't believe. But the people who know God's messages, the messages that have been coming before in the earlier times to the earlier prophets, they know that He is God's messenger because of what's mentioned in their books. Then the Almighty mentions in verse 33, the above verse was verse 20, the next one is verse 33, where God is saying, قَدْ نَعْلَمُ أَنَّهُ لَيَحْزُنُكَ الَّذِي يَقُولُونَ. We know, this is something that has been in our notice, that it causes pain to you. You are grieved at what they are saying. So we know it. فَإِنَّهُمْ لَا يُكَذِّبُونَكَ. But you know, Prophet, the reality is that they're not denying you. وَلَكِنَّ الظَّالِمِينَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ يَجْحَدُونَ. Instead, these evildoers, unjust people, are actually rejecting God's verses. So why do you grieve? You're just delivering our message. So if they are not accepting it, they're actually rejecting our message. So have comfort, don't be too upset, and keep doing your job. We move on to verses 42 to 44, where the Almighty is telling us that when He decides that a certain nation is to be taken to task for rejecting His message that comes to them through His messenger, He doesn't do it all of a sudden, overnight, abruptly. He makes the nation go through different experiences. The experiences which, if an individual or a group of people were truthful, sincere, open-minded, they would have paid heed to the message. They would have learned lessons from the experiences that they were given to go through. So the Almighty tells us, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمَمٍ مِّن قَبْلِكَ. O Prophet, we sent messengers to earlier nations before you, but they rejected them. They did not accept what our earlier prophets told them. فَأَخَذْنَاهُمْ بِالْبَأْسَاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ. So what happened was that we caused them to go through economic and physical difficulties. Why? لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَضَرَّعُونَ. So that they are humbled. You see, it so happens that when, to begin with, a message is delivered to a group of people, messengers delivered the message to their nations, because they were intoxicated by their achievements, they were arrogant, they did not pay heed to what the messenger was saying. God doesn't seize such people immediately. He knows that there is a possibility that at the moment their ability to see and to think is clouded by the success that they are having. So He makes them go through miseries, difficulties, economic difficulties and physical ailments, so that they realize that their arrogance was baseless, unfounded. But He says, then why is it that when our punishment came to them, they did not humble themselves? I mean, the idea was that after they go through economic difficulties and physical problems, ailments, they should have realized that they are weak and humble, and therefore they have got no justification to say no to a message that is coming to them from God. Instead, their hearts became hardened. Despite difficulties, they didn't believe, and their hearts, instead of softening, they got hardened. And Satan made what they were doing attractive for them. They started coming up with justifications. They started philosophizing what they were doing. So when they ignored what they were reminded of, we opened the doors of prosperity for them, and they started rejoicing. So the difficult times gave way to good times once again. So the difficult times were meant to open their eyes, which they didn't open. So then those times were replaced by good times again. They started rejoicing in what they were given when we suddenly seized them and they were left in despair. Thus, the unfair people were completely eliminated. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And all praise and all expressions of thanks are the exclusive right of the God who is the master of the entire existence. So that's what happened to the earlier nations. Then the Almighty is telling the Prophet in verses 54 to 55 that the people who have believed in Him are the ones who deserve His attention, care, His loving approach. So He should not be bothered by the people who are rejecting Him, ridiculing and talking all sorts of evil things. The Almighty says, وَإِذَا جَاءَكَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِآيَاتِنَا. When, O Prophet, there come to you people who are believing in our verses. فَقُلْ سَلَامٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. say to them, peace be upon you. Greet them with politeness, with warmth. Kataba rabbukum ala nafsihi rahma. Tell them, your Lord has made it binding on himself to be merciful. Annahu man amila minkum su'an. And this mercy of the Almighty is going to be expressed in different ways, and one of which is that whoever amongst you does something evil wrong, bijahalatin, out of ignorance or influenced, overwhelmed by emotions all of a sudden, thumma taba min ba'dihi wa aslaha, then he would repent after that and would correct himself. Fannahu ghafurur rahim, then he'll find him, his God, forgiving and merciful. So the Almighty says that, O Prophet, tell your companions, give them this good news. God is merciful, and don't worry about some of the wrongs that you've done unwittingly, not planning them to be done that way, but for one human weakness or another, for the temporary invasion of evil on them. If they do something wrong and then they repent, God is going to be forgiving. And he says that وَكَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ, that's how we clarify our verses, وَلِتَسْتَبِينَ السَّبِيلُ الْمُجْرِمِينَ, so that we make clear the way of the true believers and we make clear the way of those who are criminals. That is, even though as humans we are all prone to do wrong sometimes, none of us is an angel. However, in order to distinguish between the right path and the wrong path, the path of those who are righteous and the path of those who are evil, the Almighty is clarifying this important principle that if somebody does something wrong because he or she is a human and then repents and corrects himself, the Almighty is forgiving. But if there are people who, despite doing things wrong, they continue to follow the evil path, then that really means that they have chosen to follow the path of criminals. Then we find in verse 68 a mention that while this process of preaching is going on, the non-believers, disbelievers, rejectors of truth, they make fun of the message and the messenger. They use words, remarks which are insulting. They blaspheme. So what should be done? The Quran, like all other teachings, is perfectly consistent in its teachings regarding blasphemy as well. So the Almighty mentions here, and this is a Meccan surah, but this is exactly what he says in the Medinan surahs as well. وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَ الَّذِينَ يَخُوضُونَ فِي آيَاتِنَا. When you see, O Prophet, people who are engaged in an offensive language against our verses, that is, they're insulting our message. They are talking negatively about excuse me, negatively about what we have revealed. The Almighty doesn't say that go and kill them and harm them. He says, "Parid anhum," ignore them and turn away from them. Hatta yakhudu fi hadithin ghairi, until such time that they engage in a discussion other than what they were saying. That is, don't be in the company of the people who are ridiculing your religion. When they are doing it, remove yourself from that place. Don't react, don't shout, don't harm them. Just remove yourself from there until such time that they engage themselves in a different topic. And if you forget, فَلَا تَقُدْ بَعْدَ الذِّكْرَ, if somehow Satan causes you to forget that you've got to make sure that you're not there, you have to remove yourself. Don't sit there after you've realized and you've been reminded to sit with people who are unfair evildoers. So that's what the instruction is. We will not cut off our relations with such people because we would continue to remind them, but we will not be a part of a company or an environment where our message is deliberately being ridiculed. Obviously, people would ask questions, they would ask serious questions. At times they would be aggressive in their approach. That's not insult. Obviously, it's an opportunity for us to respond. But as and when we realize that there are some people who are not understanding the message, they're not serious about it, but they are insulting it, then we will not stay there until such time that we realize that they are talking about something different. Then the Almighty, from verse 76 onwards, has mentioned the manner the great ancestor of the people of Mecca as well as of the Jews and Christians, the great ancestor, the patriarch Ibrahim alayhi salam, delivered the message to his nation. His nation was idol worshipper. They were polytheists. His father was probably their chief. He was the most prominent amongst them all. And they were the kind of people you cannot talk to. They would start engaging in a debate with worthless arguments, but would not allow you to speak. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was asked by the Almighty to preach to his nation, invite them towards the truth in a way that was very intelligent, wise, and indirect. So what happened was that the Almighty says, "Falamma janna alayhi al-layl ra kawkaba." So when night covered him, he saw a star, and there were people around him, and he didn't talk to the people because they were very aggressive. They would not listen to him. So he talked as if directly to the star and said, "This is bright. This is my Lord." But then when the star disappeared, he said, "I don't like those who disappear." And then one night he found the bright moon, the full moon. And he made the same remark. He said, "This is my Lord." And then when the moon set, he said loudly, "Unless my Lord guides me, I'll be amongst those people who have gone astray." And then on another occasion, he saw the sun rising and he said, "Haza Rabbi, this is my Lord, Haza Akbar, this is the biggest, greatest." But when it set, he said, "I am free from what you associate with God." Now he got a little more direct. So he informed indirectly his fellow nationals, fellow tribesmen, that I'm trying to understand what you are believing in. But the problem is that they're not making sense. Can a star be a god? Can the moon be God? Can the sun be a god? No. They all set, they all disappear. And I have inni wajjahtu wajhiya lillazi fatara as-samawati wal ard. I have turned my face towards the one who has created the heavens and the earth. Hanifan, fully focused. Wama ana min al-mushrikeen, I am not from amongst the polytheists. So that's how Ibrahim alayhi salam invited his nation towards belief in one God. Then the Almighty invites the attention of the reader to the truth of the world he lives in, that this existence, the system that we are a part of, is offering signs of active presence of a mighty, wise, caring, merciful God who is providing us with whatever we need. So in verse 95, the Almighty says, Inna Allaha faliqul habbi wan nawa. God indeed is the one who splits open the seed and the kernel. That is, it's because of this phenomenon that happens all the time that seeds are open, split open, and then crops, plants, they emerge from them, that we are all living here, because we all need food, and food comes from the soil, and the soil functions in a way that rain falls from the sky, the sun it showers its blaze and the heat. It causes this phenomenon of splitting of the seeds and kernel to take place, and the end result is that we have crops, we have fruits, we have vegetables, which we eat, and those animals eat them as well, who become our food as well. So God is drawing our attention to this phenomenon, and He says that this is what He does, and He does all this to make sure that people who are witnessing, observing them, they believe. But He says that only those people are going to pay heed to these signs, liqawmi ya'lamun, who want to understand, liqawmi yafqahun, who are using their intellect, who are trying to understand, liqawmi yu'minun, to the people who really want to believe. Then we move on to this verse 108, wherein the Almighty is saying that we must not use negative, foul, aggressive, abusive language against the false gods of the other nations. وَلَا تَسُبُّ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Do not use abusive language for those deities, false deities, whom they are approaching, praying to. فَيَسُبُّ اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. Lest they should use the same language for God, Allah, unwittingly, without even knowing. كَذَلِكَ زَيَّنَّا لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ عَمَلَهُمْ. Thus we have made pleasing to every community their deeds. People are born to different nations, different religious groups, and they grow respecting their respective rituals, their gods, divine revered beings, and that's how people are. They are emotionally attached to these objects. If you are inviting people to the right path, it's so very important, therefore, that you recognize this reality and tell people politely what the truth is. Because if you're going to use aggressive, foul, negative language, they're going to retaliate. Then the Almighty mentions in verse 121, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا لَمْ يَذْكُرِ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَإِنَّهُ لَفِسْقٌ. And do not eat from the flesh meat of animals on which God's name has not been pronounced. That is, when they are being sacrificed, slaughtered. وَإِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ لَيُوحُونَ إِلَىٰ أَوْلِيَائِهِمْ لِيُجَادِلُوكُمْ. Satan whispers, gives messages to his friends, supporters, so that they should fight you. Because if you are going to eat from the flesh of the animal which has not been slaughtered in the name of God, the Quran says, وَإِنَّهُ لَفِسْقٌ, it's going to be grave disobedience. Then God tells us that guidance comes to an individual through a process which the Almighty has decided, chosen Himself. And there are people who are misguided on the basis of a certain policy, a law that is fair, and the Almighty follows it consistently in the case of all humans. So He mentions in this verse 125, فَمَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَهْدِيَهُ. So whoever God decides about, that He's going to guide him, yashrah sadrahu lil Islam, he opens his heart for Islam. That is, he starts feeling comfortable with those ideas, concepts, and preachings. However, وَمَنْ يُرِدْ أَنْ يُضِلَّهُ, the one about whom he decides that he's going to misguide, he يَجْعَلْ صَدْرَهُ ضَيِّقًا, he makes his heart tight, harajan, constricted, narrowed, كَأَنَّمَا يَسَّعَدُ فِي السَّمَاءِ, it is as if he is climbing up the sky. As we know that the more we go upwards, higher, the more it's difficult to breathe because of the lack of oxygen. So the Almighty says that likewise is the case with the people who are not interested in believing. When they are invited towards God's faith, they got to get upset. They are constricted, narrowed. This happens because كَذَلِكَ يَجْعَلُ اللَّهُ الرِّجْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. It happens because the Almighty spreads across filth on those people who don't want to believe. The filth of their evil ideas, wrong thoughts, bad deeds, immorality. If we become immoral, then there is this filth, dirt that surrounds us, which prevents people from understanding God's message, which is pure and pristine, and therefore it penetrates pure hearts. That's what God's policy is. 151 and 152 verses are talking about this theme wherein the Almighty is telling the people of Mecca that the kind of religious concepts that you are presenting, they've got nothing to do with God's message. They are your own innovations. He tells his prophet to tell them, let me inform you what exactly is God's message. So he says, قُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُ مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ. Come forth, let me tell you what your Lord has made prohibited for you. Allah tushriku bihi shay'a, that you will not associate partners with him. You will not ascribe partners with him. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, and you will be kind to your parents, and you will not kill your children for fear of poverty. For we provide you as well as them. Do not come close to obscenity, whether apparent or hidden, and do not take a life that God has made sacred, except when justified by God's Sharia. That is what He has commanded you, so that you may behave with proper understanding. Furthermore, do not draw near the property of the orphan, except for their betterment, until he attains maturity, and given full measure and full weight in justice. So whenever you are selling, do it properly, do it honestly. We do not burden anyone beyond his capacity. And when you speak, be just in what you're saying, even though what you're saying goes against a family member. And fulfill God's covenants, that is what He has enjoined you, so that you remain mindful. That's what you have to follow, instead of the kind of strange ideas and rituals that you have created yourself without having any authority from God. Verse 59 is urging the Prophet to make sure that he follows the right path, and obviously this God is saying to let people know who are following him that they have to focus their attention on following the right track that he has sent down through his messengers, and not be a part of religious groups who have divided themselves into factions and sects. That's not the Almighty's requirement from anyone. So he says, Innal lazina farraqu dinahum wa kanu shia. Those people who have divided their religion into groups, factions, and sects. Oh Prophet, you don't have to do anything with them. Stay away from them. You have to believe in God and His one straightforward, simple message, which is Islam, which is submission to the Almighty. Don't ever get inclined towards the small religious groups and sects that people have created. Towards the very last part of this surah, the Almighty is asking the Prophet to make a declaration the way his great ancestor Abraham made, to not be a part of anything that has got to do with polytheism, and focus his attention on believing in, worshipping and serving the one and the only God. So in verses 162 and 163, the Almighty says, قُلْ إِنَّ الصَّلَاةِ وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Tell them all, my prayer and my sacrifice of animals, my life and my death are all for God, the Lord of the entire mankind. La sharika lahu. There is none who partners, who is a partner of him. There is nobody who along with him is carrying the burden of running the affairs of this world. He is one and the only. وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ. And that's what I have been asked to do. That's what I have been commanded. وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And tell them that I am the very first amongst those who have submitted to the will of the Almighty. That is, while I am preaching this message to you, proclaiming it for the entire mankind to pay heed to, I am first and foremost submitting myself to this message. So that's what the pattern should always be. That the message of the Almighty is not meant to be taught and preached to others, but the person who is doing it has to make sure that he does as best as he can to be a model of submission to God Himself. Finally, in the very last verse of Surah Al-An'am, the Almighty says, بَهُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَكُمْ خَلَائِفَ الْأَرْضِ. And it is He who has given you dominance upon the earth. That is, He has created you and the system of which you are a part in such a manner that you dominate it. You are able to do whatever you want to, obviously given your restrictions, to exploit the resources for your benefit. So you've got considerable power, influence, liberty. Why? وَرَفَى بَعْضَهُمْ فَوْقَ بَعْضٍ. And what we have done is that we have caused some people to be raised in worldly status over others. Why have we done it? لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِي مَا آتَاكُمْ. So that He should try you, test you in whatever He has given you. That is, He has given you this opportunity, these privileges, so that you are tested, so that He should find out as to who amongst you are good people, righteous people, who are exercising their liberty and freedom in the right manner. He says, إِنَّ رَبَّكَ سَرِيعُ الْعِقَابِ. Be absolutely sure that your Lord is swift in reckoning. This freedom that you've got is going to go very soon. It's only temporary. So avail this opportunity to perform well in this test of your lives, because God, when it's going to come to accountability, He is very quick, swift in reckoning. وَإِنَّهُ لَغَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. But it's not that He wants to scare you. It's not that he's somebody who is all the time angry at people, at His creation. إِنَّهُ لَغَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. He is forgiving and merciful. He knows that you have weaknesses. He knows that you have temptations and that you are going to do wrong. But then He has allowed you the opportunity and the inclination to seek forgiveness as and when you do things wrong. And whenever you seek His forgiveness, be absolutely sure that He is innahu laghafurur rahim. He is forgiving and merciful. His mercy is forever. May the Almighty enable us to understand His message properly, and may He enable us to follow it as best as is possible.